Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I wanted to take just a minute on this podcast episode to tell you a little bit about the online course that we are offering now, the Bit Course 2.0, Understanding How and Why Bits Function. You can find it at the website, thebitcourse.com, which will be linked in the show notes. This is a very comprehensive course. We've got two different versions. There's a masterclass version where weekly we have live calls and go over the modules and the study guide. That course has been running 25 to 30 hours over the course of 7 weeks. If you take that version, you're also eligible to go through our BIT certification program and take that test. It's at no additional cost if you want to add consulting about bits to your repertoire of body work or whatever else you might be doing. We also will have an evergreen version that you can take anytime you work at your own pace. It is less expensive. It's also a lot less content. You don't have the weekly Zoom calls with me. Those are going about 2 to 2.5 hours each week. So the masterclass course winds up 25, 30 hours long. The evergreen course you're going to do in 12 to 15, something like that. So check it out. You can go to thebitcourse.com, sign up for the free newsletter. You'll get a 30-minute video on the foamy mouth and all of the implications of that, as well as 5 or 6 articles that I've written regarding bits. Get a feel for the content. This will absolutely be some of the best money and time you have ever spent on your horsemanship journey, I assure you. And it is not discipline specific. We cover just about every aspect of the horse world that you can think of. Our guest today is Miss Lee McLean from Alberta, Canada. She's the author of 2 books, Horsewoman, Notes on Living Well and Riding Better, and Love and Rules, Life Lessons Learned with Horses. She's a horse trainer and clinician. She's been writing and keeping a riding diary since the age of 9, which she has since turned into 2 books and a very successful blog. She is a side saddle riding and saddle fixing enthusiast. She is a stroke survivor who is sharing her journey and what she's learned on how to live well and ride better through sickness, aging, and real life. Miss Lee, how are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing really well. When I'm listening to what you're saying about me, I started to tear up because those sentences were the boiled down version of lots of years of not being well, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's part of the story. I know lots of people will be able to understand that.
Well, I think just like old saddles, it's the scars and the wear spots that make them beautiful. So I always appreciate all of that stuff that you go through.
If all the women listening to you could please stop and rewind and listen to that again. Okay?
Well, they for sure should. They worry way more about their appearance than the other gender worries about their appearance, for sure.
I wasn't going to go there.
Well, we like to start everybody off with the lightning round icebreaker questions, and these are 4 points. So be sure you're on your A game here. You can win some prizes at the end, okay?
This is why I couldn't sleep last night, because I take all day long to look for a word that I need. Lightning round and me, oh no. Okay, I'm ready.
What is your favorite way to relax?
Oh, I can relax anywhere. I've got it down to a fine art. In fact, getting my stump stirred is a biggie. Being outside. We have huge, powerful winds here. We live on the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains. And I learned a long time ago to not fight that wind and just let it blow right over me and blow all my worries away. So nature is a biggie. And then the bathtub every night for, I won't say how long. It's got to the point where if there is not a bathtub involved, I cannot go and do that adventure. That's the thing.
I have to say, this is one of those, and I work I get dirty. So when I'm taking a shower, like, there's evidence of it on the ground when I'm done. I feel like if I take a bath, I'm just sitting in a pool of my own filth and marinating in it. So it's never appealed to me at all.
Oh, well, it's well, there are times where you have to maybe do the shower first before you can stew in your own soup. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that lots of women will understand, because when your kids are young, it's the only way you can get away from your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
They
ma'am.
can't climb in with you, so it's a physical boundary. I mean, I'm 60 years old and I'm still using it as my excuse.
If it works, it works. If you were a Jedi, what percent chance would there be that you would use the Force inappropriately?
Well, for starters, I have to figure out what a Jedi is,
Oh, okay.
because it's like a knight or a warrior or something, right?
But with
they've got
mystical
lights.
powers.
They've got lightsabers.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the Star Wars, but
You're
they can
gonna
float.
die, because I have never watched that show. Okay.
Oh,
But my husband does, so I've kind of learned it by osmosis. And I would say, if there was a good Force to be had, that I would like to think that I would use only the good Force. But I know in my heart of hearts that I would always be fighting the
a little road
urge
rage
to...
might come out once in a while. Just levitate.
That's as far as we'll go with that.
What is the saying? It only takes one slow walking person in the store to remove the illusion that I'm a good person.
There we are, right? Yes. So yes, if I was a truly good person, I wouldn't let Facebook comments get to me in the way that they do. But that's a whole other story that we'll no doubt touch on later on.
That's yes, ma'am. I think we should definitely touch on that later. I got a few fish to fry there myself. Morning or evening?
Oh, morning, 100%. I can hardly wait to get up in the morning. It's like the sun doesn't come soon enough.
Is your husband a morning person as well?
Oh, Lord, no.
It always seems to be that I'm the morning person and my wife is absolutely not a morning person. Yeah, so but I guess that's
he's banging around, he always seems to start a construction project after I've gone to bed, because you can only be one or the other, right? And I'm always trying to remember, no, he'll have my coffee ready for me when I wake up in the morning. So I just, that I bear it with ill will, but yeah, we're opposites.
Do you have a physical fitness, stretching, or mental well-being type routine that you stick with?
I want to so badly say yes, religiously I do. I come and go from it. I really do. I really do. I don't feel well if I don't. But right now I'm aware of the fact that I feel like I'm 75 years old, so I need to get doing something. Walking is a biggie. We're a long way from town, and at the price of a gallon of diesel, I don't go into the gym or join sports. So I use that for hauling horses. But a person should. Walking is it. Every now and then I belong to a group that does yoga for riders, because anybody who sits a lot in a chair often has a hard time sort of opening up their hips or whatnot, not feeling it when they step down. So I think for all of us, if we want to be horse people as we age, we have to be understanding and accepting of the fact that what we put into our bodies and what effort we put out we're not 20 anymore. That didn't used to even be an issue, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But more and more, I'm starting to accept that, yes, it is.
Bay or sorrel?
Well, I could say if it had 4 white feet, because I like being flashy, even if it's not wise or correct. It doesn't matter. I really like bays, but if I'm honest, my best horses have all been plain old sorrels, and very often the dreaded chestnut mare. You know that one.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not a bay horse guy, and my personal horse is a bay horse, and it doesn't. I've seen enough of them where it's kind of more the good horse is never a bad color sort of a thing. But bay wouldn't be my preference, and I probably say this too much, and the people that listen regularly are sick of hearing it, but it's like 80 or 90% of people's preference is bay horses. And I threw
Truly?
this in.
Really?
I
Really?
figured it would be like 50-50 or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
I had no
Yeah.
idea there was such a preference for bay horses in the world, and it's not even close. It is
Okay.
far
Well,
and
I'll
away
tell
bay
you
horses.
something funny. I have had to learn, because I have done it. I have bought every color of horse under the sun just to see if they were any different. And they're all horses.
Yes, ma'am.
I even bought spotted ones to see if they were different. And they're just spotted horses.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. This is one I'm on the fence about asking you. I play with these once in a while and change them around, but I just feel like I have to now because I'm on the fence. That means you have to, right? Live boldly. So, would you rather have a drink with Bill Cosby or a cigar with Bill Clinton? The world we live in.
I would have the drink and the cigar with Bill Clinton, I think.
Okay. All right.
I would. Because I think he'd probably be a very interesting conversationalist. But I am not above a drink or a cigar, I'll have you know, Mr. Doff.
Dogs or cats?
Well, I would like to say both, but my husband, who is truly both, would say that I'm a dog person, because there's that little part of me that likes to snap my fingers and be obeyed. I really like the fact that when I come home at the end of the day, the dog is the only person who's truly happy to see me. An old lady once told me that when I was picking men, to pick men who were nice to cats. Because she said the men who are nice to cats will also put up with you. And she was right.
So among dogs, do you have a favorite breed of dog or type of dog?
Yes. Officially, I am to say Border Collie, because we're ostensibly supposed to be all about the working dog here, where we are. But I did flirt dangerously in the realm of the Basset Hound.
Oh my goodness.
for a while. And despite the fact that she was never truly house trained, she had no recall whatsoever. She could hear potato chips opening at 40 paces, but she did not know her own name. She could open the fridge door, but she didn't know her own name. I would love to have another.
I think that might be breed-wise about as polar opposites on the spectrum of obedience as you could possibly get.
My husband sits there with his Border Collie at his feet while I'm trying to get the hound to just even come. Yeah. It's not that she couldn't, it's just that she didn't want to.
There's no motivation there whatsoever. Yes, ma'am. My grandparents had a Basset Hound named Betsy, and I can still hear that dog howling, barking at cars in my head. Every time someone says Basset Hound, I see Betsy in the corner of the yard, just barking at cars. Yep.
Well, mine's name was Ella, and she was truly a thoroughbred among hounds. I do think I will have another someday, but I might have to have a different husband.
Just make sure you get a black and white one. Maybe he won't notice.
Okay. Yeah.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Oh, the eternal question. I have decided that if somebody else is willing to make the pizza, does it matter?
Okay. So would eat, but wouldn't order. Is that fair to say?
No, I don't know. Somebody else is buying.
Do you like a thin or a thick crust?
Thin crust. It's all about the toppings. Yeah.
Are you a cook?
I have had to be. I actually cooked in a cookhouse for a really well-known ranch in the area for a long time. cooking for men on a wood-fired cook stove. I can cook, by golly. We ran a guest ranch for many years, so I can cook. But again, if somebody else is standing in front of my stove and says, dinner's ready, come and get it, I am not going to push them out of the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask this if you were more on the likes to cook, but I guess I still will, since you've done a lot. Do you have a favorite meal to cook?
I'm a ranch girl, so a really good home-raised roast beef, and I like biscuits. I like homemade beans that is soaked, that kind of thing. That's comfort food to me. I cannot make, no matter how hard I try, Yorkshire puddings, though, which is just a shameful thing for a person who makes roast beef. But there we are. Full confessions.
How many holes do you think are in a straw?
One great big long one.
It's the only right answer.
Is it really?
For sure.
Okay.
If you drilled a hole in a board, it would just be a hole, a singular, right? You're a writer, so it's just a longer hole. That's exactly
alrighty,
right.
Alrighty.
If you want to ruin a straw, take like a tack or something and poke another hole in the side, and it won't work anymore. So
okay, yeah, that's true.
I heard of a mom that used that as a trick with her kids and the Capri Suns or the juice boxes, because they would drink them down in 3 seconds and want another one. So she would give them an ineffective straw, so it took them several minutes to be able to drink it that way.
Oh, it's like giving your kid a slow feed hay net or something, huh?
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. Do you have a horse industry related pet peeve that you would share with us?
Oh, how much time do we have?
All the time in the world. That could be a book unto itself. I could just make a collection of all the guests' pet peeves and do a little article on each.
Man. I would say probably the one that just came to my mind first off was the people that just get right in their horses when they first saddle up. You know, they pull them up so tight right off the get-go. And I've never saw the need for that. Unless you're afraid your horse is going to come into and pile your rig. I don't know. But it sure does make a cinchy horse.
Yep.
And no matter how many times you tell people, they still want to do it.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that, or is that just a Canada thing?
Oh no, I see that all the time. And even ultimately, like I'll normally saddle a horse up snug, but not where the saddle won't slide off of them, but and then like lead them to the arena, and then I take it up before I get on them. Even when I take it up, it's not super tight unless I know I'm about to rope something or something like that. I don't ride with it real. I see people ride with that thing so tight. I'm just wondering. There's no way a horse could.
Your horse's eyeballs shouldn't bulge out
yes,
when
ma'am.
you've girthed up. Yeah, as a general rule, I would say that's probably sound advice.
Feral or spoiled? Which would you rather fool with?
That's a good question. I have done both. I have, I think, made a little bit of a name for myself for choosing to deal with spoiled. And I don't know whether that's because I like beating myself up or whether it's because not a lot of people want to take some of them on, because they can be so confirmed in their mindset that things go bad real fast. And I know it's man-made, but they're still not easy. But I'm going to go with spoiled, believe it or not.
I think you're only the second guest that has chosen spoiled. Pretty much everybody else has chosen feral.
Yeah, I knew. That's just confirmation that I'm weird. I knew it. Doesn't mean that I don't get upset and have bad days with them just because I chose to work with them, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
There's still hard days.
Crunchy or smooth peanut butter? I really have a lot of food questions in here. I may have to purge that a little bit.
I would say we'll be able to get along then. Actually, the crunchy. Come on. I can't even believe this is even a question. Right. My husband would say smooth. In fact, he's making toast right now with peanut butter and he's pointing at it because it's crunchy and he hates it.
Well,
Oh, it's
crunchy.
healthy. He hates it because it isn't made with icing sugar. I buy the kind that's just peanuts and there's like 4 inches of oil on top and you got to stir it in with it. Yeah, we're so incompatible. I don't know how we've made it work for over 40 years.
Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
Oh, what to choose? I have a really weird and varied taste in music. So my playlist on my truck when I'm hauling horses is everything from metal to opera to cathedral choirs with the little boy soprano singing. It's like it's out there, but anything else bores me.
Okay, I can appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
If you could choose any new skill, ability, or even a superpower, what would you choose?
I'd like to be that little Samantha woman on Bewitched who can wrinkle her nose and have the house clean. Every time I clean my house, which isn't often, granted, I'm always going, well, there's an hour of my life I won't get back.
You
Yeah.
know, every time you clean something, you're really just dirtying something else. You don't really get rid of the mess. You just move it
Oh,
around.
that's profound.
Here's another one. I love this one. When you clean a vacuum cleaner, you become a vacuum cleaner. How about that?
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
I have a whole list of those things. I call them amygdala hijack questions when you work
Okay.
with people that get way too into their head or they have a little wreck or something and they get fearful or kids, the crying person on the horse thing. You walk up
Okay.
to them and tell them that vacuum cleaner thing and they'll look at you like, what the hell? But it snaps them right out of that frame of
Oh,
mind.
and ever so much more effective than just yelling at them to get over themselves. Yeah.
For sure. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. That's
Yep.
a good one.
Thoughts or feelings?
Excuse me. There we go. Since I am newly deciding that I need to put more into thinking good thoughts, I'm going to say that I'm a feelings person.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to have to start backing it up with some real thought, not just, going off my cuff. Yeah.
The habits we have in our head are maybe the most important habits we have for sure. So I have a music question next, but you kind of already answered that. Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse related tool?
I'm a gear hound. My tack room is just filled with treasures that were sort of easy to get when I was a young person. So I really, I like to honor my horses turned out with nice gear, but my favorite thing is probably my own personal side saddle that was rescued by a lady who I don't know out of a dumpster one morning when she was taking her garbage out. And she somehow got my name because she'd seen an article about me in the paper, and she called me and she said, would you like to drive the 2 hours to my town and come and get the side saddle? And common sense told me no way. And a little voice said, what have you got to lose? Go do it. And it turned out to be an incredible saddle built around 1885 by S.C. Gallup, Pueblo, Colorado, up here in Cochrane, Alberta, Canada. I have no idea why. It had to go into the back when I drove home because it smelled so strongly of cat pee.
Oh,
But we got her cleaned up. I re-rigged it, and my daughter rode it racing side saddle at the Calgary Stampede. So it's got a lot of meaning to us. And how it ended up here, I have no idea. Yeah.
maybe it was just meant for you.
I think it was.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
Decisive. I can't stand indecision. It grates on me, and you just get the ball rolling and deal with what falls out from your decisions. I think. I don't know.
What is the best smell in the barn? Obviously, it's not cat pee. So, what else would you pick?
Obviously not. No, that's true. Well, horses themselves, right? I'm already thinking about when I'm going to go in the old folks' home, how I'm going to deal with the rest of my days without the smell of a horse. So that has already occurred to me. But new hay that got put up dry and is in the loft, that's a pretty big deal. It smells pretty good.
I'm thinking, yeah, there's got to be a market out there for a candle that smells like hay, or a candle that smells like a little sweaty horse. You know,
Wouldn't that be something? Yeah, there you are. We have a native bush here. We call it silver willow, wolf willow, and I can't remember the Latin name for it. But the smell of that silver willow in bloom over the hills in the spring. Oh, you could bottle that. And I think maybe that's just mixed up with our fact that we've just made it through 7 months of winter. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good one too.
would you? I don't know if you do a lot of traveling, so maybe we'll take this question out. But are you rather stay at the event in a living quarters trailer, or rather go to the hotel and get the heck out of there kind of person?
Well, the good horsewoman in me says that I would want to stay where my horses were. But we've got that bathtub issue, so I'd have to sit and think with that for a while. I don't think living quarters trailers have bathtubs, so I'd be in trouble.
Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Salty, salty, salty.
All day long. Yes, ma'am.
All day long. Yes, sir.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
Well, no, but one of my clients took me down to the Exumas, the line of um, islands about an hour from Nassau, Bahamas, to stay there last January. And I discovered this incredible world called snorkeling. And I'm a landlubber, right? When I take my clothes off, I'm just glowing blue, white alabaster. Okay, so this was so surprising to me. But that world under the sea, the colors, it was just they had to like get a big hook and drag me in, and say you've been out there for hours, you need to come in. That was incredible. All those little fishes.
So my household is entirely redheads except for myself. So we don't need any night lights. They all just glow in the dark. They can find the bathroom with no problem whatsoever. Can appreciate that. And my wife, still, we just got done treating a severe sunburn on her. Like, she just cannot figure out that she cannot go out in the sun in a tank top for 3 hours without sunscreen on. She's going to be a lobster when it's all said and done. But
Yeah, some of us are slow learners. There is that.
And have you ever had a UFO encounter?
I don't think I have. I've been driving along at night with strange glowy lights that would appear, but I don't know if that's what that was. But I do believe that there is stuff that I don't know or understand that is out there. I mean, I grew up in a haunted house, so I know that there is energy and presence and everything that we can't see that can rip the mantle off the wall, and
Yes,
so
ma'am.
it's there, and I just accept it.
And then y'all would have the northern lights, I'm sure, where you're at
Oh,
all the
we
time,
we
huh?
do, we do. Recently, it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
That's a bucket list for me. I wanna see that one day. Um, well, that concludes. Oh, I have one more question that I have added. I'm sorry. On a scale of 1 to 10, what temperament of horse do you prefer for yourself to ride?
For myself, okay, that makes it different. My most difficult horse for me personally are those ones that are advertised more woe than go. I have steam coming out of my ears. It just doesn't feel right that I have to work harder than the horse. So I would say let's go with a 4. Let's go with a 4. Because there's
Okay.
some that are just a little too, I don't need to win a chuck wagon race or anything.
Yes, ma'am. Well, that concludes the lightning round questions. I'm going to tabulate your score here.
I'll do the drum roll.
You have accumulated 2,817 points, which makes you our highest scorer of all time, the ultimate winner.
I'm the champion. Okay, you know what? All I know is I could have slept last night. I didn't. I did not need to lie awake worrying about this.
I'm sorry that you were bothered by it. I was trying to put your mind at ease here, but anyway. Well, as the reigning high scorer, you are entitled to either a genuine compliment or an awkward silence, your choice.
Oh, ooh. That's actually a tough question for people.
For some, for some there, one is clearly more awkward than the other. I've been a little surprised at what people have chosen over. I started these questions just because some people are nervous and they don't do this kind of thing a lot. And I thought it would help break the ice and all, but it's really become a very revealing. It might be my favorite part of the whole podcast.
Well, if I asked for the awkward silence, I could leave and go get a cup of coffee. I'm going to ask for the awkward compliment.
That's exactly the kind you're going to get too, I'm afraid. All right. So I really, really appreciate about you. I think I overuse this word sometimes, but it just is it's a facet of human personalities that I don't see that we see that often. So when I see it, I really appreciate it. And that is your candor. You just are very open, and that's rare. Most of the time when you meet people, there is some form of a wall in between, and you are willing to talk about subjects that might be a little uncomfortable or some might consider embarrassing or shameful, and you just embrace it and run forward, which actually makes you heroic and brave and useful, because when we talk about things that are only comfortable and safe, we don't learn a damn thing. It's just a waste of everybody's time. So you being willing to tackle some of those more challenging subjects makes you an actual useful person, and I don't think there's that many of them out there. So I very much appreciate that aspect of you.
Wow, thank you. To be useful is a really big deal. I have a daughter who is very talented. She carves leather and builds things, and she's also very beautiful. And her mantra, and it's right on her business logo, is be useful as well as decorative. Because she can't stand women who will not dig deep. When you sit down and talk to someone, let's not talk about the weather. Let's talk about ideas, what fires us up. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I like it. There are plenty of people out there who are only decorative. There's no doubt about that. So, very good mantra there.
We probably are no danger of falling in that pool, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I'm speaking for myself. Yeah, falling.
No.
Okay.
Well, the first real topic I would like to tackle with you is probably the most mysterious of all that I know about you, and that is the side saddle thing. Like, you don't have to anymore. Like, why would you want to? What's your attraction to the side saddle end of the world?
That's a good question. We don't have to do it anymore. I'm gonna take you all the way back to, I have been riding since I was a wee little thing. I haven't been writing about it since I was like 8 years old, but I've been riding since I was a wee little thing. And my sister and I grew up in the bush country in the central part of British Columbia, and it was really undeveloped. There wasn't a lot of power. The house that we lived in didn't have running water, for instance. I remember the first time we got a toilet, an indoors toilet, and my sister and I just flushed the thing over and over and over because it was such a marvel, right? And so I grew up in that environment, and we had ponies, and it was bears and cougars, and we would be gone. There was no phones, of course, no helicopter parents. My mother did not know that we were okay until we rode back into the yard after dark at night. And I don't know how she did it, but that's what we put her through. And we moved to the next province over, and my mom had an elderly friend of the family over, and he was watching my sisters and my antics with the ponies out in the yard. And I don't know whether we were knocking each other off or what we were doing. I don't know, but he looked at us, and he turned to my mom and he said, "Who is going to want them?" And he said, "They need to see my sister, and she will teach them some deportment and how to be ladies, blah, 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 blah." And his sister turned out to be a very well-known rider internationally. Winnie Harvey was her name. Her husband won the Victoria Cross for action he saw in the First World War. She went by rail. She had a special dispensation to compete on the military teams that went and they did the show jumping and the cross country riding and everything. She did with her side saddle. She was a big deal. We didn't realize that at the time, but she did her best to try to turn us into ladies, which included learning how to ride side saddle, schooling our horses to go correctly, and somehow it became a standard of how you lived your life, how you carried on. We ended up going over to England to learn to ride side saddle. I've gone several times to learn how to repair them, to flock them, because I mean, what can go wrong with a saddle that's a century old, right? So they have to be redone. There's quite a lot to that, but I stayed with it, riding side saddle, teaching. It's become a big deal. There's waves of it, and I think, yes, we don't need to do it anymore. And yes, I spend a good deal of my time straightening my horses after I've been riding side saddle, because they do kind of end up going hollow to the left. I will admit that. If we don't sit right, we can soar them. I admit that too. But I'm super interested in women's history and the realization that until women could ride side saddle, they couldn't go anywhere of their own volition. Think about it. They walked. They stayed home, had kids, did embroidery, made soup or whatever. They rode in carriages or behind men or whatever. It wasn't until they got the side saddle that somebody said, "Here's the reins. Go where you want, at the speed you want." And that was their freedom until they were allowed to wear trousers. And then the side saddle, faded away. But it fascinates me. And if I'm honest, I love the clothing and I love being the center of attention. You tell me any other group of young women where the 60-year-old lady can be the center of attention.
I like it. Yes,
and
ma'am.
So there we go. Take a ride on the wild side. That's become my mantra.
Well, you could certainly say that there has been a pendulum shifting in the world of femininity and masculinity, and I think at the point where women can't wear pants or shorts or anything is maybe a little too far on one end of that scale. But like you say, the period clothing, the lady on a horse in a dress and all that, there's definitely something appealing about that, whether she's 60 or 80 or 20.
Yeah,
it is
I
got something to it.
Well, yeah, as I travel around, because I do teach and I do clinics and whatnot, there are people it's a bucket list item to try, and there's others that it's a novelty thing. But I have never wanted to be a figure of fun doing it. So my goal always is what level of horsemanship I can achieve on that particular horse. that's my guiding light when I'm side saddle. So can I have the horse straight? Am I sitting well? Am I, I don't want to be sitting there in a depressed heap with my bosom slapping my chin. That's not my goal. And I have to kind of keep that uppermost in my mind. And you're going, thank you, Lee McLean, for that visual.
Uh, I have to say, if I were riding and my bosom was slapping me in the chin, I would immediately think things were going wrong too. So yeah.
And it happens more often than you know. So yeah, it is, and it comes and goes. It's right now, side saddle riding is kind of enjoying a high point again. I've lived through, I think, about 4 of those things in popularity. But yeah, as long as the guide is do no harm to the horses, are fun, and that would go to dressage, jumping, cattle penning, team roping, whatever. Our goal should be do no harm, right? We can't always, I wrote about that this morning actually, expecting our team of vet, farrier, chiropractor, dentist, body worker, whatever we employ, to keep our horses sound despite how we ride them.
Yes, ma'am.
So side saddle has to go under that same heading. We can't be harming them. Otherwise, it's not horsemanship.
So I was recently doing I transferred phones and I went from an iPhone to a Samsung. So I couldn't swap my data straight across, or at least if you can do that, I don't know how. So I'm having to manually type in notes and stuff. And so I pulled all of the ideas for articles I've had in there. One of them, this was a story I've been wanting to write, but it's about the horses can only carry 25% of their weight rule.
Yeah.
And all of that. And I know that originates from some cavalry stuff, and it was really referring to dead weight, like pack animals, where the weight can't help balance. It can only, it's, completely dead, and the animal has to not only carry the weight, but balance the weight. One of the things I like to talk about there, I'm a fair sized guy, and I tend to ride cut and bred horses. I have for a long time. So I do get some comments of you're too big for that horse and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember there was a place when I was apprenticing. We had hired a new young lady to come in and warm horses up. We call them lopers. And she was a little bitty thing, probably 120 pounds. She was a barrel racer. And so she starts warming up all these horses. And within a week, every horse she had been riding had a sore back because of the way she was riding them and kind of she wasn't really carrying herself very well. She was too forward and all of that stuff. And that's just one of those things that I think about time and again when people mention horses carrying weight and all that the much bigger men rode the horses without getting them sore. And the young lady riding poorly weighed half of what I do and, got everything sore that she rode in a week's time.
That is an issue that doesn't have an easy, straightforward formula for an answer. A lot of my program is with ponies. And I wish I was that young lady that weighed 125 pounds. That would be so awesome. And I'm not. And I don't actually ride little tiny ponies. They've got to be like over 12 too. And if they're a stocky built Welsh pony or something, they can pack you all day long up and down those hills. And the bone, the fitness of the animal, how you ride, your saddle. I think there's a lot to it. But I do believe, as far as my ponies go, and there are people that will argue, because again, Facebook comments, they'll say things, right? And I'm going, I don't need you to tell me that I'm fat. I saw that this morning, thank you very much. I want my ponies, however, to have earned the honor of carrying your children. I see too many people plunk their kids on ill-mannered, uneducated little beasts. They would never do it to a full-sized horse, I don't think. And then hope that it'll all work out for the best. Well, it doesn't. And so I like to install some buttons. I know nobody wants a push-button horse, and I think a push-button horse is about the best thing you can ever give a kid or a beginner rider. So that they can push a desired aid in a place that's known and expect to get a known result. And I think that if that pony needs me in its life to teach that, then he will really appreciate it when he gets the 60-pound kid. I don't know. It's like,
Yes, ma'am.
I've got a practical mindset that is very often at war with always and never thinking.
Think of how many people out there riding horses, not just kids, but adults too, haven't felt what it feels like when it's right. They've never ridden a horse that does it right so that they can know that, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. I see this all the time with kind of the do-it-yourself amateur trainers. They're aiming toward a goal and they don't actually know what the goal is because they've never felt it, ridden it. Think of what a crock pot that is for frustration when you're aiming to an aim that you don't actually understand. We do that backwards for sure. Yes,
We
ma'am.
do it backwards because I do believe in my heart that the best teacher of riding is the schooled horse. I would never say to somebody, here's a rope, go out and learn to rope something without having a horse that's been its job, right? Somebody has to have the brains in the outfit, and yet we think we can get around that. It's a hard one. My kids all had really nice horses growing up. That's one thing that we all made sure that they had. We rode knotheads sometimes. They were on really good horses, and we'd get these terrible comments. Like my kids are in 4-H, and so up to level 1 to 3, they were expected to ride two-handed and snaffle bits. And so they're on a horse that's a bridle horse. So I would put them maybe in a half-grade bit, nice bit, Rommel reins. Kids are sitting there. They would invariably get stopped as they're riding into the arena, that they should be two-handed in the snaffle. And I'm like, but why? And they're going, well, what if they jerk on the horse's mouth? They will never jerk on this horse's mouth. This horse goes like a dancer over air. My kids are not using the reins like they're starting a chainsaw. You know what I mean? It was a thing, and we actually had to write it into the rules that if the kids were on a one-handed horse, they could show and compete without question, without being knocked back one-handed on that horse. I was like, that's a thing that I'm constantly sort of fighting or raising awareness or whatever. That always and never thinking, that the snaffle is kinder, that children shouldn't be in any bit with a shank or whatnot. No, it depends on the horse that kid's on, and it depends on the people that are supporting and teaching that kid. It really does. It's a thing. So
for sure.
And that opens up this whole other thing that you have to talk with me about. On today's horsemanship is telling me that it's better now, that there's a lot of the past that I'm to be ashamed of. And I think if we're evolving people, we do want to improve if that's in front of us. But I was taught by good people. I was taught by really good people. I refuse to be ashamed of them and the knowledge they put forward. And it's a thing that I am balancing with, feeling my way along, Daniel, all the time.
Well, I think we both have an element of progress, but also a strong backbone of old school with us, and I completely agree. I think there's a lot of value in the past and that we should honor it, and we shouldn't trash it just because it's old. I also do think, all ideas should be taken on their own merit. So there was some generalized stuff of the past that was wrong, or that maybe wrong isn't the right word, but we know better ways to handle this now. And
Maya Angelou quote of "When you know better, you can do better."
Yes, ma'am.
Is
exactly
such a guiding light. But sometimes I'm being told it's better, but I'm not necessarily seeing it. I don't know if horses are going any better now than they did in my childhood, or whether or whether we're all just more critically thinking about it now or not. I don't know. I have
I,
I have I have thoughts about it, but
I would say that in my opinion, the way I would describe this is we have some people now that are pretty popular who are maybe they're very open-minded and they're more in the exploring stage, but
yeah.
sometimes
And
they present what they're testing and experimenting with as though it is tried and true fact, and it in fact is not. I do come from the science side of things, and there are a lot of very new, in relative terms, I mean, the science of behavioral conditioning is almost 100 years old. So
okay.
there's a lot of experiments that have been done there. And then we hear things like pecking order has been debunked. Pecking order has in no way, shape, or form been debunked. Pecking order
Thank
has been amended a
thank
little
you for
bit,
saying that.
you
Thank you
know.
for saying that. I have a huge herd of horses here that have tracts of land. There is no resource guarding. There is no fences holding them together. They don't need to fight over the water trough, but there is a very clear cut. And I know that sometimes the boss will let the weakling eat with him and everything. And I think, I see that. But there is, make no mistake, everybody under the boss Haas is waiting for him to turn up his toes and die so that they can, do you know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yes, ma'am.
it's almost like the military. They do have their thing. And anybody who forgets that for an instance and gets in between, or I say gets on the wrong side of a more submissive horse, they're going to get run over, right? I think that's knowledge that's gotten this whole wild horse model that I've read so much about. Well, the last wild horse that I brought in was a 9-year-old stallion. Somebody beat the tar out of him for many, 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 many years. He was not living in a peaceable kingdom. He was covered in scars. It was like a road map. I mean, somebody was beating him up, and he was living, all along the Rocky Mountains. It was should have been perfect, horse heaven. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a again with degrees, but yeah, we're taught that doesn't exist. And I stand there and I have spent so much time just sitting out amongst horses because I want to know them. They calm my heart down. They're good for us. I sit there without asking things and I observe. And I'm not seeing that there is no such thing as pecking order. And that it is only for the wolf pack and all this other thing. Horses can be the most peaceable, beautiful animals in the world, and they can also be thugs. Um, you know,
Yes, ma'am.
one or the other, all in the same 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And some of them do carry grudges. I have a gelding right now who is going to be spending the summer with me because he has decided randomly that one of the other horses must die. Now, he has lived with that horse all winter, but all of a sudden he is voted off the island. And rather than keep the picked on one in the corral, looking wistfully out over the hills, I've brought in the thug. And he and I will get to spend extra quality time together, I guess. But yeah, I don't know whether it's language, Daniel, that gets in the way of our understanding of each other in groups. I don't know what it is because I think most of us want the same thing, do we not?
I
We
think
want
so.
our horses,
Yes.
we want our horses happy. We want to be safe. We want to be, I was going to say, we want to be able to do a job with them. There's the error of my thinking right there. There,
How
okay.
how dare you want a horse to be useful and productive? How dare you, ma'am? It's terrible.
So there's the beginning of the split and the shift right there. And when you say to somebody in a kind and respectful sort of a discourse, debate, my horse apparently seems to enjoy his job. And they go, no horse likes a job. That's a man-made notion. Well, you can go out in the morning, trailer's ready on the truck. Horses know we're going out to gather cows and work cows, right? You tell the one old horse that he is not needed today, that you will be going with the young idiot. You tell me that that old horse, and it's not that he's afraid of being left alone by himself, because there's 20 other horses with him, but he knows that you are going off to do a job that he alone only needs you to hold the reins on a technicality, right? He
Yes,
knows
ma'am.
his inside out. He was bred to do it. He loves to do it. He is a working man and proud of it. I just think that's very presumptuous of us to say, no, he's not. He likes cookies and carrots too. He likes to be a lawn ornament and live beside the house too. But he's also a fine working horse, you know? And
Yes, ma'am.
it's a mindset. So this, and of course, you and I both have a presence on social media. And I do think that this is how the world is working largely right now. We have this free resource at our fingertips to connect with like-minded people or not. But often what we're putting out there into the world is received in different ways by people. And I see that horsemanship has very different meanings all around the world, right? It does. But I have to hold true to the fact that we all want the same thing. We want to be able to do this as long as possible, as safely as possible, and I don't know, become better people while we're doing it.
I am kind of drawn to this topic, and it's one of those things I intend on writing on, but I have not found the words or how I want to approach it yet. I don't know if you're like that. Sometimes my writing topics have to sit on the back burner of the stove for a year, and then all of a sudden it's ready. So that's kind of where this is right now. But I am convinced that there is a significant, probably a major percentage of the people in the horse world that do not know what a horse is. Like, they can look at it and see four legs, but if you had them describe the animal and the personality traits and the temperament, what they would describe would be a unicorn, in my opinion. They don't really know what a horse is. Like most people would talk about how gentle, they're big and gentle. Well, tell that to the 9-year-old Mustang stallion, right? How gentle does he think horses really are? I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that, but I think that's a pretty important conversation. But it's also, if you just upfront tell somebody that they're wrong and they don't know what they're talking about, that isn't going to be received in a helpful way either.
That's kind of on us too, right? I've lately made this, and it's not lately, it's the last couple of years, made a practice of reading the work and following the pages of people that I don't necessarily understand or agree with. We're coming from very different worlds. And it's become a thing that I'm wanting to do, is to sit with something that's uncomfortable. Oh, that's not easy. Sometimes I'm going, oh, okay, I can see that for the first time. Maybe because I'm always trying to fight this thing that the older I get, the more right I am, because that's easy. And so I'm trying to open my mind and my eyes and read the other people and see where maybe I could handle things a little differently. I'm perhaps the only horse trainer walking the earth who still has doubts, who still makes mistakes, who still can screw up a horse. The other people that I watch all seem to know the answers. So I have that in my heart too. My family is riding horses that will never be sold. My family is riding horses that I have wrecked. and getting the job done. But, we're lucky that we have a place for those horses.
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
I'm always going, I would do that differently if I could go back, right? To 20-year-old Lee, who's dealt with things like impatience and anger. That's hard stuff to share with people, but it is there. So I do have a hard time believing that everything is sunshine and lollipops, which is often how it appears.
For sure. That might be part of that social media influence as well. Now you have to have a persona in addition to your personality, and you have to always be on because there's a camera and a mic not far away, and the world will see every single second. So
yes,
you have to be a lot safer. I think that's part of the, like, I'll freely admit too, I still do a lot of experimenting with horses on a daily basis. I have a horse do something to a more or lesser degree than I expected. I would consider myself a little wrong. Like, I'm setting this up, I'm expecting this outcome. Wow, that he blew up. Like, I didn't think he was going to blow up. I didn't see that coming,
I
and
did
so
not see that coming. I can still do that. I can still do the I did not see that coming thing.
I would
my
say
husband and I got hurt with a horse 2 years ago, both at the same time. The one horse. Now that's a trick. Okay, that is a talent. Anyways, after all is said and done, and the ambulance bills have been paid and everything else, and we're on our second batch of those little rubber pads that go on the ends of the crutches. Okay, so the dust is settled. Somebody says to me, "Well, what did you learn?" And I was taken aback. And all I could say is I learned that sometimes things are okay until they're not. That's how we failed to see that horse maybe had stopped breathing or something. You know what I mean?
yes,
and in the split second that I went, uh-oh, Houston, we've got a problem. We had a problem. Just like that. Yeah.
I think, people talk about the states of fight or flight, but I think what you alluded to a second ago, freeze, is maybe the most important one to recognize and probably the hardest one to recognize. And sometimes they're not in it long. You don't get a good look to go measure everything.
For a horse that was just kind of free trotting and then hesitated, right? Just sucked back in that moment of, I went, oh crap. And that turned out to be the wisest thing I thought all day. Because then from then on, it was beyond, there was no one rain stop about it. So we're taught these things will keep us out of trouble, to observe, to regulate, and to have all these, there are times when your best thing you can do is hopefully have the chance to mop it up.
Well, I think this might be the perfect segue into our sponsor for this episode. So if you'll give me just a second. Our sponsor for this episode of the Adult Onset Horsemanship Podcast is Rain Alert. It's not just raining men. Equestrians are flying through the air all the time too. As an equestrian, you've signed on to one of the more dangerous sports mankind has. Anything that requires a helmet, $20,000 to get started, and might not only smack you with Mother Earth, but also get you stepped on by a 1,000-pound, four-legged flight risk, involves a special kind of person. At Rain Alert, we understand that you might not even be able to call for help after you've fallen and can't get up. That's why at Rain Alert, we've got you covered. Our two-part system involves specially made reins and saddle seat sensors that will automatically send a signal out to our switchboard in New Delhi if you leave the saddle without hitting the I'm okay button first. Imagine that you're trying something extra crazy like eventing or riding side saddle, and things get out of hand and out of pocket. Rain Alert has your broken back in the palm of our hands. We'll reach out to emergency services for you and get you the help you deserve. With our optional premium package, we can even monitor your vital signals just in case there's really no need for the ambulance and it should just be straight to the morgue. For the extra premium package, we'll even stage your body in a car crash so that nobody will blame your cookie and carrot eating baby as the monster who did you in. Rain Alert. We'll be there for you when you've fallen and you can't get up. Your subscription also comes with benefits like special discounts on walkers and wheelchairs. Every fifth call comes with a home health nurse for 30 days and a free intervention from those who love you and want you to stop hitting rock bottom. Rain Alert.
I hope it has an override button for when I get off for pee breaks, okay?
Well, you have
when I ride off surreptitiously behind the silver willow, I don't want my Rain Alert to go off. Oh, that's funny.
You got a satellite looking down on you peeing in the brush, huh?
Yeah, I have often wondered about that. Finding yourself on Google Maps. Oh, that's funny.
Well, I thought of this as we were doing the lightning round questions, but I had the question about feral or spoiled, and then you told the story of you and your sister. So how do you feel about feral people? Do you have very many, that distinction in your customer list? Because we kind of have these ways that we split people up, but I think feral or spoiled could be one of those lines as well amongst the ownership class. So,
well, one of the things that has changed between my horsemanship now and when I was a child is the growing up with horses untended. And my father had one rule, and I've never figured out whether he was really worried about her safety or whether he was just cheap. But we rode bareback because he said, at least when you come off, you won't be hung up. And he always thought the horse would probably not be getting bucking or anything too hard. We would be off before then, you know what I mean? But so we grew up really unschooled, and that meant there were some bad habits that later on had to be broken when I entered. At 14, I apprenticed with a German dressage teacher, which took my life in a very different direction. I did not finish school, Daniel. So when you talk about science, I'm very aware of this shortcoming in my education. But I see kids now, whether through insurance costs with the barn that they ride with, or the teacher, or the fact that they're in soccer and skating and gymnastics and everything else, we've substituted that somehow with the 1 hour ride time. And it has very serious implications for our horsemanship, but also for our horses. Right? And so
yes, ma'am.
We rode so long, and it wasn't fast. It was just constant. We rode to the store to get our dad's cigarettes. It was constant. I had a Shetland pony that I rode who was, she looked like a racehorse. She was so fit. And it was just snatching bites of grass occasionally as she went by, but it was constant riding. And we learned a lot in that time that isn't easily replicated with paid instruction. And I applaud the people who are learning to ride later on in their lives. But it's a very steep hill, this catch-up game. It is a steep hill to learn about how the horse thinks, moves, what he does, reacts, our place in all of that, and then learning the whole mechanics, if you will, of your rider position and everything, because it is an unnatural thing. And I think when you're talking about the weight of the rider on the saddle or whatnot, there is something about riding so long that you are physically tired. You just go with the horse because you have no other choice. You are tired. and you really learn that magic that goes on in the lower back. I mean, there's nothing as unschooled, but yet right as a group of guys loping out in the morning on their colts to go gather stuff. You know what I mean? They're just like flowing water.
Yep, look
But
like part of the horse.
they've never had an up-down riding lesson in their life. I don't know if it's better or worse. It's just different. And we don't have that as much anymore. Yeah. I do think schooling and lessons is good. It's important, you know. Being unschooled is nothing to be proud of. Unless you're a banjo player. I also play the banjo as well as have a basset hound.
Oh,
I
well,
should really live in Louisiana, shouldn't I?
yes,
I'm
ma'am.
like a misfit in Alberta, Canada.
If you're willing to eat just about anything that the Lord has created, then you would fit right in, I think. And for what it's worth, you mentioned you didn't get a complete education. I think you might be the only person that has noticed. You definitely do not come across as uneducated or anything like that. Maybe a little feral, but in all the right ways. So
Yeah. Sometimes I'm a little snorty. Yeah.
everybody should have a little touch of that, though, right? I mean, I kind of wonder how many of the people who aren't feral aren't because they're just too scared to be, right? The scars and the wear and tear
Yeah.
are the part they're
Yeah.
shrinking from there.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, one of the other topics I was going to ask you about, which kind of is, I won't say it's completely your niche, but you definitely have a large presence in this area, is kind of riding later in life, as you had just mentioned. You're kind of unapologetic about your age and everything that's happened to you, and now you have to deal with this with maybe physical limitations or whatever. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
I was 42 years old. I had just ridden in a side saddle race, had won it. The next day I was teaching 4-H and I was hauling 4 horses and my daughter down a icy road, black ice road with rain. We'd been weaning all week. I couldn't pull my boots on or buckle my spurs. I had a really hard time getting onto my horse, even climbing up the rail fence. My daughter, as we're hauling the horses into 4-H, had to keep putting my hands back up on the steering wheel. And what I didn't realize is I was having a stroke. And most people would say, well, duh, and that would be right. But rural people, it is frowned on sometimes if you pay attention to how you're feeling. You push on, and you can get a lot done with that mentality, but eventually your body will say enough, right? So I ended up having a stroke, ended up in at the stroke unit in the city and all sorts of little stories. But the long and the short of it is I survived. I was sent home, and I went through a really deep, dark place. We sold my antiques business that I had. My license was revoked, so I couldn't drive. I couldn't swallow. One eye was closed. My whole face was down, and I just kind of fell off the turnip cart of life. And I was done riding. Obviously, if you can't keep your eye open and swallow, you have no business being on a horse, or so I thought. And my husband said to me in one of his brighter moments, he said, well, what are you going to do with your life now that it's like in front of you like this? And I was boo-hooing, and it had been quite a nasty session of me feeling sorry for myself. And I said, I really wanted to not be doing all the other little things that I'd done to try to pay bills. I drove school bus for 18 years. I had an antique shop. I worked as a cook in this cookhouse. I said, I just want to do the horses. I'll ride horses. I'll teach people. I'll sell horses. And that was my incentive to get a little better. It was a long, long go. And as I dealt with certain things, I dealt with things like vertigo. I dealt with things like fear. I was sick. I had not been hurt on a horse, Daniel, but I was scared to get on that horse. The first time I rode, and it was just a absolute canner of a 4-year-old. I have no idea why I was riding him. I hauled him down the highway to ride with a person who still I consider a mentor. Vance Cagley, if you're listening, thank you. I didn't have my license yet and had this nutty horse with me. I was shaking getting on that horse. The horse hadn't hurt me, but he did kind of open up all the problems I was having in my life and the doubts. I'd never had a body that let me down like that before. So long and short of it is a lot of this stuff, Daniel, made me learn to have a little more empathy when I'm dealing with people. I learned that we can get over a lot of stuff if we have the right people supporting us and if we have the right horses. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I try to, that's kind of the horses I sell and ride now. I keep my horses far longer than is financially viable because I'm turning out horses that I hope will have the ability to be forgiving with a lot of people. And some, as you know, have more of a talent with that than others. But my illness, my aging, my struggles have all really shaped who I am today.
There's the scars in the saddle, the wear and tear on the leathers, the fenders, the jockeys. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Just so that I don't forget this, I really wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, if this is too personal, then that's fine. But it does really tie into part of what I've studied a lot over the last few years, and that is the swallowing. Do you mind going into that a little bit? And I'll tell you exactly why. With the bit video that I did, I approached a multitude of experts, and one of the areas, as I was approaching the horse experts, this includes veterinary professors, veterinarians, all sorts. Within 5 minutes, I could run them out of answers. I could be asking questions about the hyoid apparatus and the tongue and the way things worked, that we would get to a point very quickly they didn't have an answer for me anymore. Right. And as it so happens, I knew a couple of speech pathologists, and I was talking with one of them. She's my cousin's wife, and it dawned on me as I was talking to her that she's a speech pathologist. She's kind of an expert on the tongue and how it works and all of that sort of stuff. And so I turned to her, and then I have another resource who specifically works and has for her entire, she's probably 40 years working with stroke victims, specifically in teaching them how to swallow again, and so on and so forth. And I really have to say she's always asked to remain unnamed, but she was maybe one of the most valuable resources in that project that I ever came across, and really was the light bulb moment for me, in that swallowing is majorly physiologically connected to relaxation. And a lot of the things we look for in bits, like the foamy mouth is a wet mouth is a good mouth. The reason a wet mouth is a good mouth is because it causes the horse to swallow the saliva, and then we activate the mechanism of swallowing, which causes a parasympathetic nervous system response and relaxes the horse. So contrary to what a lot of people believe, when we see a foamy mouth, that's actually an indication that the horse is not swallowing. And the part of the wet, the part of the wet that we needed, we missed. We're looking at the symptoms and not the cause there. So my question for you, if you could think back to that time, did you find that maybe you had more periods of anxiety or something like that, and that swallowing was negatively affecting you mentally or spiritually, because that was sort of taken away from you? Or I know that's a long time ago and maybe an odd connection to make, but
my experience ultimately made me a better horseman, because when we take away something that is supposed to be automatic, that our body looks after for us without thinking, there is a unbearable sense of doom and a burden at the fact that I am now struggling with having to do what came naturally. I liken it to the sense of desperation we feel in the dentist's chair when he's doing his work and the saliva is pooling in our mouth and he's maybe a little slow. I actually ask for the little vacuum thing so I can do it myself now, because to overflow with spit is the same feeling as drowning, as being under the water. So immediately, this would wake me up at night out of a full sleep if I had this drowning sensation, a total panic, my heart racing. It has made me super, super aware of horses' mouths, tight nose bands, the fact that that jaw is not able to even physically, mechanically move in a way that allows the swallowing. I learned early on that we were always taught that thicker bits were kinder bits, until I had the horse that wanted the very, very thin bit because of the way his mouth was constructed. I could see the saliva pouring out the side of his mouth because he couldn't close it around that bit, and his tongue out. Mm-hmm. It's made me very much more empathetic, and I do really believe that tongue, the swallowing, the hyoid apparatus, the musculature underneath the horse affects the hind end. It's all tied together, right? Mm-hmm. The knee bone is really connected to the elbow bone. They were right all along. But definitely my panic, it affected my breathing. If I couldn't swallow, I held my breath. If you're holding your breath and somebody sets you to a task and says you are holding your breath now, are you going to do that task calmly, or are you going to rush through it and hope like hell you survive? The slurring, the drooling, everything, it all tied in with what we're seeing with horses in their mouths, for sure. I have been taught this from the longest time with the woman that I quit everything with and went from age 14 to when I was married. She did not like to see a foamy mouth. She called it a distress signal, an SOS.
Yep.
And so all the dressage pictures I'm seeing of these horses that are winning their medals and awards, and I'm going, oh, there's a little part of my voice going, is that horse as comfortable and as brilliant as he's looking? It puts it, once you start seeing these things, you start seeing them everywhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And they'll go, that's really the champion. They'll go so far, if a horse isn't foaming enough, they'll take marshmallow cream and smear it on the mouth to make him. I mean, like, what are we promoting here?
Blows the top off my head, right? It blows the top off my head. Which, I mean, so then of course we're looking at bits and bitting, and you've made that a huge part of your life. And I can only be a student of what I see and feel in my hands or whatnot. The horse sports, like working cow horse, that has to have a bit with the port and the roller in it and everything to be legal and everything. Lots of horses do work well with rollers. I said lots of, right? Doesn't mean they all maybe do. The dressage horses that must be started in the snaffle. Am I the only human being on the planet that has noticed that some horses truly, really hate the nutcracker action? But they have to be in that snaffle until such time as now suddenly they're in the double bridle. There's no in between. there's one or the other. And then so so there is tradition making me question a few things. I
yes, ma'am.
have begin to believe that if people want to show in dressage with their horse in the bitless brattle or the net rope, maybe they should be allowed to. Because there would be a judge, assumingly scoring on all these movements. There maybe should not be a rule saying that they cannot do this or this or this, as long as they are safe, as long as they can stop and turn. So I do have a lot of questions about the mouth gear and the headgear that we use on our horses. I have noticed, however, the better my horses get, the more they understand me and they get confident, the less any of that it seems to matter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they'll have a favorite, and by favorite, I guess that's a man-made notion too. I'm not supposed to say. They'll have a bit that they seem to accept better, work better in. But, the 29-year-old horse we just put down, he'd probably go in. Well, I know he went in a neck rope. He'd go in a piece of binder twine tied around his jaw. He would go well. That's how he used his body. So it's a hard thing, but it's a fascinating topic.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I do get a big time into the bits, but I completely agree with you that they matter less than we tend to think they do.
Yeah. I would say that 100%. I would say that 100%.
So I kind of pulled you off of what we were talking about, and that's sort of the overarching theme about riding later in life. And you do clinics and you write a lot, and that kind of, I would say, is your wheelhouse. So what sort of things do you see in your customer base or your social media audience? What are some of the perennial themes that creep up that are the issues these people are? And I say these people, I mean, it's women, right? We're mostly talking about women of a certain age. They're 80% of the customer base in that world. So I guess
this brings up, I would like to address this before I go off any further. I am very worried. I love women. I am one. I am very worried that the demographic is going so heavily to one side. I have worked in an office that was all women, and I welcomed the male energy of the one man who was brave enough to show up there. And so whenever we start swinging heavily to one way, and again, when I was a kid, you did see more men riding. In my world that I am right now, ranching, there's lots of men riding, tons. But as I go out and about to the stables and various places in the world farther away from home here, it's like it's got to be 8 out of 10 riders at least as women, and that does worry me. And I have an unease about it, and I don't know why. I have an unease about it because I think we're really going to miss the knowledge and the energy that comes with good men. But back to traveling around teaching people. I have to believe that people are good. They want it so badly, Daniel. They want to improve. They wanted to have beautiful things with their horses so badly. And I keep seeing this. Too many of us are riding the wrong horse. Which flies in the face of everything that's going on, because horses are beautiful creatures. They know more than we do. They do their best. They're inherently honest. Everything deserves a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth chance. There is a lot of people learning to ride on horses that I would not get on. I would not get on those horses, Daniel. I would be afraid to get on those horses. And it's, to me, it keeps a lot of people in business. This need for constantly going back to square one, for somehow staying safe, everything else. It certainly means we will need groundwork forever and ways to deal with horses. But people are handling and learning on horses that I would be afraid to ride. And I'm a pretty go with the flow kind of rider. I am.
I definitely agree with you there. I've had one of my pet peeves is the standing up in the saddle thing, and I kind of get it. It looks cool. At the same time, I've been wanting to do a video where I like start a colt, and then the first or second ride, I stand up in the saddle and crack a bullwhip, and then like split screen it, and basically it's a pick which is which. So here's me on a 18-year-old, my son's horse that's dead broken. Anybody in the world could ride, standing up in the saddle, cracking whip. Here's a horse that's been ridden 60 days, standing up in the saddle, cracking whip. Here's a horse on the second ride, stand up in the saddle and cracking whip. Two of those horses, 95% of people have no business riding. And
okay,
yet
yeah.
I can do this. It is not an indication that this horse is broke enough for most people to ride.
It seems to be a favorite thing, a thing to show for selling horses or at horse sales or whatnot. Hey, I would go. Since when was it a waste of people's time to prepare a horse by teaching him to lope a circle? A lot of those horses can't,
Yes, ma'am.
They can run around with the tarp, but they can't steer. Yep. So it's the getting out of the round pen. That's something that I see that's the big deal. I'm always encouraging people to ride their horses 50-50 in the arena, schooling them 50% head out over the hills. But I realize that for a lot of people, just getting out of the round pen would be a very big step. Maybe get into a bigger arena or whatnot. I think we can really those can become a crutch. But that would be the thing, I think, is the thing that I'm seeing is people meaning so well, trying so hard, learning on just desperately unsuitable horses.
I would definitely agree. Kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, the kids and the push button horses. We have way more green horses than we have, and we have way more green riders, and green and green make black and blue.
Well, that's what they say. I come up with a formula a long time ago because I taught 4-H kids for a long time, and I called it the rule of 20. And I said, if we're going to add your kid's age and your horse's age together, let's end up with at least 20. Okay. And sometimes it's 30 or more, but as my kids got older, by the time they're 16 years old, 15, 16 years old, and maybe in a little better control of their emotions, then I start giving them the gentle colt, that they can be a horsemanship project to start a colt. Because if they've never ridden a horse that isn't really knowing his job, they don't actually understand how much time went into making that horse. And I think that's a really big part of their education, is to respect that somebody did make that. In my kids' case, it was usually their grandpa. He made good horses. But then it was still the rule of 20. That's 16 or 17-year-old kids on a 3 or 4-year-old or whatever, right? And it was a good little guide, so that it was kind of a sliding thing. As the kids, got older, they could maybe deal with a younger horse. But and I haven't come up with the rule yet that as we get closer to 80, what that adds up to. I'm not sure. The Century Club, I suspect. But I do know that the older I get, the more I do appreciate a good kid's horse.
They're harder to find than most people think. There's a lot of them advertised that way.
That good kid's horse is likely the horse that many of us need as retirees or people that are getting into horsemanship after not being in it all the while they had a job or kids or whatever, Yeah, for sure.
So one of the, and if you don't want to go here, that's fine. I'm just going to use this as an example, but
as long as you're not talking about my love life, I am good to go.
That's fine. Yes, ma'am. one of the laws, I would say, kind of the horse universe that I feel like I just can't find an exception to, is that anything that comes along that economically devalues horses is ultimately bad for horses. And I find in the world we have a lot of, I'll call them well-meaning people, kind of the unicorn crowd, the ones that I don't think would actually just be able to describe a horse. They're describing some mythical creature instead. They wind up affecting policies and laws and things that ultimately they're trying to do good, but the economic effect of that decision or that new law or whatever winds up devaluing horses and ultimately hurting horses. So for instance, that 16-year-old very well broke horse, someone did put a lot of time into that, and there aren't enough skilled amateurs to provide enough of those horses to the public. So that means most of the time those horses were paid to be trained, which means someone's got $20,000 or $30,000 wrapped up
Yeah,
in
that's the
this
sad
animal.
truth in it. Yeah.
But this new rider coming along wants to spend 2,000, and they wind up with the green horse that's
Yeah.
cheaper, and then they get hurt, and now we have a horse that's labeled as has hurt someone, and it just turns into this big snowball. And as much as we want to do it for the horse and we want to do what's best for the horse, I don't think we can ever separate the economics out of it, the financial viability. That's part of where the horse is being useful. If
Yeah.
there's a task that you can accomplish on him and you need him, then you're going to pay the price for him. If you don't have that task, then that horse becomes less economically viable, and ultimately, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but the cases of neglect and all in the US have just skyrocketed in the last 20
Well, you
years.
guys have a little double whammy too, because you kind of put the kibosh on the horse slaughter industry, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
And so the sad fact of the matter is, and none of us likes to think about that, but where do those horses go that can't fit in with what we ask of them, right? And the answer to that is they're now being shipped to Canada for slaughter, or Mexico, or when they get to Canada, they're being shipped live to Japan for the horse meat trade. So that was a well-meaning rule.
Mm-hmm.
That was a well-meaning rule, but it had very dire consequences that I don't think anybody knows how to fix or deal with anymore. I'm sorry that horses have become almost lifestyles of the rich and famous. The closer that you live to an urban area, the horse board check is akin to a mortgage payment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it is sad that we now have to, in Canada, we're spending maybe 12 or 15,000 will get you a good, safe trail horse, or a performance horse who's now past his best and needs, maintenance and slow mileage or whatnot. So you want a kind of decent horse that you could do ranch versatility with, you're looking at $20,000-$25,000 here in Canada. Our exchange rate's pretty dismal compared to the US, but we're talking a chunk of change. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the answer for the people that can't do that, and I couldn't do that, Daniel, if I wasn't making the horses. I couldn't just go buy a horse. I know I couldn't. So it is a very real thing. And yet on the other hand, it's supply and demand. It's always has been thus, right? Those good horses are not easily found.
Well, one thing that I think is a very untold story, and I don't know how this goes in Canada. I would assume the trend is similar, but in the US, we have lost 40% of the horse population in the last 17 years. We've
What?
gone from, we had in 2007 pre-horse slaughter ban, we had about 10.4 million horses in the US, and they just did another sort of horse census last year, and I think we're at 6.2 now, something like that. We've lost over 4 million horses in the
Where have
last
they
20
gone? Where
years.
have they gone?
I
Or are they
I
not
think
being bred?
they're not being bred. I think that's the bigger issue. But I mean, 40% of a population is, if that were spotted owls or bald eagles or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah,
like,
we'd be on high alert. I mean, the
yeah,
fact of the matter is every major breed organization, the 5 big breed organizations in the US, I was at a conference with them, 7, 8 years ago. The membership numbers are really dwindling because they're not getting men now and they're not getting junior riders. Whenever you have and they're all complaining about the same thing, trying to come up with incentives. Well, it's getting too expensive for the average family to do it. Is it fun when it becomes a money game? I don't know. But the writing's on the wall. You have to wonder. I know people don't like the term the horse industry, but you have to wonder where it's headed because it's not in a sustaining model right now, is it?
no, ma'am. Yeah, I very much fear we talk about trying to help people and all, but will there be any people to help or any horses to be worried about it in another 15 years? Because in the trajectory we're currently on,
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I better open up my antique shop again, or get back driving school bus, because I think about it a lot. It's really dwindling. In our area, there was the open shows, within a couple hours haul, there was shows every weekend you could go to. And even those affordable chances of competition are no longer. Everybody's very specialized right now, which means a horse bred, purpose bred for that event. There's not
yes,
so
ma'am.
many things for the ordinary horse to do anymore. It is a worry. It's a concern. It'll have
The
to be somebody far
specialization,
smarter than I to come up with the fix, the cure. Yeah.
yes, ma'am. The specialization does worry me as well. We really kind of have one trick ponies now where, 50
And
years ago, you would have
yeah,
shown the same horse in
one
halter and reining and
yeah, and one trick people, which might be even as is fundamentally worrying for me. Our greatest cutting horse trainer, who is dead and gone now, he had in his barn jumper riders, harness ponies. He made calf horses, calf roping. This guy was all around and he could pick, as did so many of these older trainers. That generation who was born in the 1920s and 30s and everything. They were so all around, they could harness a chore team. And we don't have those people just popping up in the woodwork that can solve all these different problems. And I think that it has affected our ability as trainers very often to problem solve the unusual or something out of our realm. I know for me, I do have a really varied background, and when everything's got expensive or difficult, I quit that sport. So I can actually ride a horse for a little while and go, oh, I would be wrong to put you in this ring. I think you need to be over. You're not a pleasure horse. You want to be doing pony hunters. And that helps me try to not put that square peg in the round hole as far as horses go. But I do see danger with our specialization, with our training. Are we able to problem solve for different things? Some of the horses that people are training now are so well bred for what they do that if there is a horse that comes along that isn't easy for, he's just, he's not trained. He's kind of, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We're not problem solving quite so much anymore. A horse that has trouble learning to change leads, we just sell them. Go find one that can. And that's an unhealthy aspect, I think, with professional riders. It's the problem solving aspect, I don't think is as strong as it used to be.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. About half of my business usually is problem solving, and I guess I'm not just shocked anymore, but there was definitely a period where I was pretty surprised at some of the problems that I would get in that were basic and simple and easily solved but that
Okay.
horse had come from a professional, and I'm just like, how have you been riding horses for 30 years and this was ever a problem for you? It would just blow my mind how like this is kindergarten stuff that needed to be fixed, and I solved it in 3 days or something. And so how was this dragging out for 6 months under a professional trainer's tutelage? And it doesn't really surprise me anymore, but it is shocking to me still, I guess, that
Which
we do
ultimately,
have.
in many ways, where we maybe avoid getting into it with a horse that's got some sort of an issue out of kindness. But is that a kindness if he now gets thrown on the reject pile and he's got no skill or something, you know?
Yes, ma'am.
You and I both know that there's a lot of bad days in between the good. Overall, we hope to be seeing some progress, but there's always going to be, little bad days. I think when I look at it, my horses are not, and when I'm going to use this word again, that's a bad one, but I haven't come up with one that I'm going to say broke, okay? And that's a bad word. My horses aren't broke if they haven't learned how to come back from a bad day. So we want to handle them always with positivity, building on positivity. But every now and then something happens and the wheels fall off. My horse is going to be a stronger character and a more well-rounded individual if he figures out with me how to get over that. Because I'm seeing a lot of horses that part has been skipped. And our phone's ringing. I'm seeing lots of people that's been skipped now. It makes for dangerous horses who are kind of flakes.
What you were just talking about seems somewhat to me to fit kind of one of these movements that's going on right now, and one of those that I very much think is in the wrong direction, about putting no pressure on a horse. People think if they ever upset the horse or anything like that, that they've erred, and we have to keep everything low key all the time. And to me, the defining characteristic of what a broke horse is a horse that can handle some pressure and they don't lose their mind. They stay here and under control, and that's what we're all looking for. That's that 20 and 20 thing, that 16-year-old horse with the 4-year-old kid. They can tolerate the erratic hand movements and noises and all of the things that kids do without losing their mind. And you could very much think of all of those things as pressure. So do you agree with that? How do you see that movement? I don't, where you're at in Canada, or maybe you get more of that on the internet. I don't know if you get much of that sort of stuff, but I run into that pretty regular.
Probably the biggest blowback I got to one of the posts that I wrote was about the broke horse. And I had said, in my world, that is not a broken individual. And I won't buy that. There's nothing about him that's broken. I'm sorry that word is offensive to so many people, but there is no other word. Schooling, training, nothing comes close to meaning what that word means. And it is, whether it is considered wrong to want that anymore, all I know is I want to be on that horse when the shit hits the fan. Give me that horse, please, even if it is wrong to want him. So much of it can be akin to raising kids. We are not doing our children a favor when we don't teach them how to wash their own clothes, how to make a bed, how to make a pot of macaroni and cheese. I always said to my boys, I do not want you getting married or getting tied down with one particular person just because you can't do those things. There has to be another reason. You do not need to be looked after or cared for. You don't want to do your math homework? Okay. But I will not be protecting you when that teacher comes down on you tomorrow. I will be right with that teacher, because there is consequences to our actions. And I want a horse who is able to accept the consequences of what it is to be a living, breathing person or character in a world that we actually don't have any control over. The minute I start saying to people, could you not use that air drill to change the cultivator shovels? Could you please tie that dog up as I'm working my horse? I know that I am skating on thin ice because I am stealing rides by trying to control the environment around that horse so I don't get into trouble, so that I don't get into a situation where I'm in trouble. The minute I start wanting to control the outside world, and I would say to anybody listening, is that something that you are familiar with? Do you have the feeling that you need to be in control of your environment so that you're safe?
I just did
Otherwise,
a
yeah, sorry.
no, I just did a little video with my youngest son Colt. We were skeet shooting in the pasture. He was shooting. I was doing the dad part of it, but and we're doing that with the horses out there. And actually did it 2 days last week, and in one of them, they're 50 or 70 yards off to the side,
Okay.
and we're shooting box of shells, and they just, they didn't even move farther away. They just sat right there and continued grazing and all of that. And I know here in about 3 weeks or 2 weeks, we're going to have the 4th of July here in the US, and the fireworks are going to kick up, and I'm going to have horse people in my social media feeds pleading with their neighbors to not pop fireworks to disturb their horses. And I have no such worry. My horses are going to be just fine, because they're prepared.
Wouldn't it be just such a super kind and easy thing to a few days ahead of time have a recording of gunshot or fireworks or whatever? Doesn't have to be at full volume, and that could be playing somewhere around your horse so that he went, oh, I recognize that sound. I have the tools to deal with it. Thanks, Mom. Party away. That would be a very easy.
Yes, ma'am.
That would be a very easy thing. But then that is something that we could do to help. But it seems to be more of human nature to try to control the outside world around us.
Absolutely.
I know.
And the arbitrary meanings. That's one of those things that always makes me kind of smirk. If you remember George Carlin and his 7 words and all of that stuff, you can say shit or crap, and they mean exactly the same thing. But one you can say to a 4-year-old kid, and one you can't say on TV, or you'll get fined. So
Okay.
like broke or leadership, all these words that have since become dirty words in the horse community. I'm a bull in a china shop with that stuff. I don't hesitate to use them.
Okay.
I think it's that pendulum shift. We get drawn too far over here, and then you need that person with some sense in the center that starts to draw them back to reality.
Well, I think
that's part of what that is.
Yeah, sometimes we have to be mindful of what is hurtful to other people and what is wrong, and then other times I think it's okay to take the torch and go, maybe it's my job to try to spread that this word isn't what you think it means, and open-mindedness for all of us is an ongoing struggle, and I try to be gentle about reminding people that my broke is not your broken, perhaps. Yeah. And always the horses tell the truth, no matter what we're trying to put across. I'm not all that worried in people's methodology or their equipment or anything, but I can quickly kind of go through their pictures. I can see how their horses are doing. I can see whether those pictures show those horses have tension or they're not maybe coping with what they're being asked to all that well, or it's maybe building their body up or down in certain ways that maybe I can see the foam in the mouth. So the horses have a very good knack, a real ability of telling our truth. Darn them anyway.
Well, We kind of just broached the subject, and you mentioned this earlier in the interview also about social media and dealing with the people that you have to deal with on there. So your following is significantly larger than mine. So I'm sure I really don't get that much of that stuff, to be honest. So I'm not a practiced pro at it, but how do you handle those sorts of comments and things?
My husband, Mike, says that if he comes up the walkway, he sees a black mushroom cloud over the house. He knows that somebody said something mean to me on social media, and then he'll have to hear about it for the next hour. I am trying to get better than that. So I picked my battles. If somebody's committed to totally misunderstanding me, then I'm actually doing them a favor by going block and delete, because they might as well be with their own crowd. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But respectful questions that are asked in a spirit of, I truly do want to understand how your mind is working, Lee. I'll answer those all day long. I truly will. But I do think that we have a responsibility to build our community, which is what a public page is. It's a community. And for the most part now, I would say most of the people get along really well, whether they agree or not. We've kind of, I send all the renegades to Dauphin Horsemanship.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
But I have this beautiful thing of having carriage drivers from the UK and dressage people from Germany and working cow horse people from the States and ranchers from along where I live and people from the cities. And everybody is, for the most part, just really intrigued about what makes other people tick and just loving our chance to be with horsemanship and horses. And like I said, trying to make us better people in the end. I don't want to be a horseman who is not a good person. I have known such people. I have known people who claim to love horses and dogs and cats, but don't like other people. And I raise the question, how can you be a good horse person and not like your fellow man? You can not like what certain people do, but you've got to, I don't think we can selectively choose who we love and don't. So I try hard to, so a lot of my posts will be a lot with my own journeys with such things as depression and addiction. Because I feel that is a part of my horsemanship, and there might be somebody else out there too who might, set down a heavy burden if they know somebody else deals with it. I've learned that I might as well call a spade before somebody else does. Takes the sting out of their words if I've already said, well, it is what it is. I said, I said this already. Speaking of spade, I've gone through many years of hauling my horse to various places and putting his headgear on inside the trailer and then backing him out and going on and riding and doing my thing, because as long as people didn't know that he was a spade bit horse, they liked him and they were nice to me. But the minute they saw when he got rid of it, suddenly he was downtrodden in the worst way. And I was guilty of horrific crimes. And so I don't know if I can ever really be proud of that part or not. I just do it. Not all of my horses are spade bit horses because I am sending my horses on to the public. And I learned a long time ago, you do not get a horse working on a signal bit, looking after himself with the freedom that entails, and then send him to a hunter jumper barn where he's ridden in a snaffle on a constant contact. Because shame on me, that was mean of me. So when I see where maybe this horse is set to go, I'll ride that horse in that kind of headgear and try with the people that take him on. I have people come stay with me for a few days, and I go, I know that you want him on the contact, but he has to be ridden on the buckle sometimes too. Stuff like that, you know?
Yes, ma'am.
And
Absolutely.
so there, we do all have a responsibility for meeting the horses where they're at, which is hard because sometimes we know what we know for sure, you know?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
As I get older, I maybe know less for sure than I used to. It's been quite a lot of fun on Facebook. There's a Facebook memories thing that comes up where you can see stuff that you posted on that day years past.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read something I wrote, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And I'll go, oh my word, I can't believe I actually said that. And that I actually put that online and I, you know, period, that's the truth, you know, and because I would never say that now.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know
That's the
whether
curse of
it's,
learning.
yeah, and
The curse of
I don't,
learning and improvement. Yeah.
right? So I
Uh-huh.
see with myself, that social media has been a good thing because it has made me grow in that way. If I was in my own little backwater doing my own things, I would know an awful lot more stuff for sure.
We talked a little bit about your cattle operation and giving a horse a job. You have also, I know, in your lifetime ridden many different events, kind of just about anything. You said when you were 14, you went and apprenticed with a German dressage trainer. I'm guessing you heard 9 or yelled across the arena many, many times and all. So
Yeah.
with that breadth of time and experience, what would be some of the take home points that you have learned that you might share with us? A few things, just sort of cross culturally, cross discipline, cross time.
That she saw some good in me as a 14-year-old kid who was kind of riding in some open shows, making my own horses even then, but very unschooled. And she took me on. She turned out to be kind of an abusive old broad, so I've had a lot of that to get over in my life, learning that there was some good in what she taught me and some stuff that was really unfortunate. And that was on a personal level. She was mean to me. She was very gifted with horses, and it did change my life. I learned how to rehabilitate horses that were not moving well, not using themselves well, maybe that appeared almost injured or lame, but weren't. It's just because they were so crooked. I learned about the mouth and a thing we just call stretching, but that all collected work has to start with stretching the horse's top line, getting his hind legs under him, and then it also is rewarded with that afterwards. So I don't just ride my horse in collection for half an hour. And I see that. I don't just ride my horses long and low with his nose down and out for an hour. And I see that. The magic is in the stretching, the loading, the release. And that she was so ahead of her time in that regard. Her kindness, that these things were not, that there was no such thing as a dressage horse. That all horses could be benefited with some sort of classical dressage, if we want to call it that. She just called it good riding, but it is called classical dressage now. All horses, not just the ones meant to star in the competition ring. And as I married my rancher and got surrounded in the cowboy culture of the working horse, which was like a 180 from where I was, I married him. I had actually on her written letter of recommendation been accepted into the Neindorf School Institute in Germany. And that is my lasting biggest regret, that I stayed safe, stayed small, did not go there. And I came home, became a ranch wife and did all that. I will always wonder what if, but what really was a magical thing for me, Daniel, was seeing the parallels between the good working stock horse, which my new life was celebrating, and that beautiful working dressage horse that I'd left behind. It was the same horse, which brought all these questions to me. Is it our gear? Is it our hat we wear? Is it the ring we work on? Is that what makes our horsemanship? No, it's taking this raw piece of putty that happens to be an unbroke horse, unschooled horse, and making something beautiful of it. And I watched the best people in both worlds. Their horses got more beautiful with time. Like that stopped me in my tracks, Daniel. That one of the guys here, he had a horse that he would sometimes bring into the branding pen. Just heel a few calves and do a thing. That horse was 30 years old. That was a spade bit horse. And these guys they were like a beautiful marriage, right? Because he would think, the horse would think, and nobody was giving anything so vulgar as an aid or a cue, right? And he was so proud of his horse. He had ridden the other young horses all day long, but his beautiful, glorious moment was bringing that 30-year-old into the branding pen just so people could take a few pictures, see, and I'm going, that's horsemanship to me. The long road, trying somehow to always improve and get better and honor that older horse. And I saw that it is possible. And it's rare when you meet, and he was an older man, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mustache, older man. When you meet those people, whether they're in leggings or boots and breeks or whatever, hang on to their every word. Study what they do, because they're the quiet people. They're the ones that don't have an online following, but they've got stuff to teach.
Very, very true. The thought I was having when you were talking earlier about people that like horses and dogs and cats, but aren't very good with people. I see that pretty commonly, and I guess my thought on that is that horses and dogs are literal, and you can trust what they tell you,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more predictable. And I very much see a number of people in the horse business that are really good with the animals and not nearly as good with the people. And I would put myself on that list. A very big pro, I would say, in the horse.
To the point that you dislike people?
I'm not a people person. I would rather be off to myself.
I'm not either.
Generally.
But I've had to really sit with that and look at that and go, no, if I'm going to love the horses and do right by them with how I'm making them, I've got to see good in the people. It's not
I would
easy.
say I like a person. I don't like people. How about that?
Oh, that's a good way to put it, perhaps.
I can like people individually. I generally, genuinely have to say, like when I do clinics and things, I'm generally meeting 12 people that I'm glad I was around for those 2 or 3 days. Every once in a while, you do get one in there that you could just as soon have not had, but yeah. Most of them I enjoy and appreciate. I also really enjoy the quiet in the truck on the drive home.
Yes,
where there's no more questions.
I would say that most of us, after a clinic situation, really do, our batteries are run down low. I don't think the average person knows how much of your heart and soul you give to teaching at the average clinic. I was something that a mentor had to tell me a while ago. She said, Lee, you can't maintain this. And I said, well, why not? Because I was defensive. And she said, because you want it more than they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, but as though it was on me personally that this lady couldn't ride her horse past the in gate, on the arena. I'm giving her the tools that I might use to help with such a situation without actually going, to you, I give this, and it's up to you now to do something with it. I would take it as something that I needed myself. So when you are teaching people, becomes a really huge thing. I am not a person who teaches a lot of clinics. Most of my students are regulars. They come weekly. And so that's something that I often say to people, if they have a person locally that they want to mine for information. If you can I think you can progress a lot farther with a little bit of learning every week than a fire hose of learning one weekend a year. But when I say that, I also realize that traveling clinician is maybe the only teacher that person has close by. And we do the best what we've got. But some people, do you not think how far they'd progress if you could just see them for a little while, 6 weeks in a row?
Yeah.
It would.
A couple of thoughts on that. One thing I try to do with clinics, and I don't know of anybody else that does this, and I don't know why, and I guess maybe I shouldn't be saying this out loud. Maybe it should be my little secret. But after a clinic, I write out a big Word document. The last one I did was 25 pages long of everything we did during the clinic and what the exercises were, what the aim of the exercise was. You might remember so-and-so had this problem on their horse and we adjusted it this way. And what I would want to see you progress over the next 6 months is this. Watch out for these potholes. And like I say, it's usually 15 or 20 pages. The last one was 25.
That is such a gift to their learning.
And I think that's like 6 months worth of homework is the way that I think about it.
That is actually a really good gift to their learning, because you're also taking into account that some of us learn really well from doing and watching, but some of us seeing it in the written word kind of, it hits that nail home.
Different
That's a beautiful thing
of learners. And then I would say that your people are blessed to have you in their area where they're close enough to come to you. I would say that they're like, I'm not in an area that lacks for instructors, but I wouldn't say that there are 80% of them I wouldn't send somebody to. Let me put it that way. There are plenty of people out there trying to teach who themselves don't actually know. And so you kind of have to be careful what you learn and who you learn it from, because you can go a ways down a less than great road.
We're in an amazing area here. We've got like world champion working cow horse trainers. We're real close to Spruce Meadows. We got great jumper. Like, we got great professional riders here. It's like a hot spot. Fantastic people here. But there is the allure too of the person who comes from away, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if there's somebody coming from, getting on an airplane to go to your area, that's a pretty big deal.
Yes, ma'am.
You'll go and see them. You're not going to go see Lee McLean down the lane. It is what it is, and I think one of the things is we can learn from just about anyone. Everybody's got one person who loves how somebody teaches, another person doesn't get a thing from that teacher. I would say, if anybody's had an experience learning, don't give up just because you didn't get along with a particular teacher or that person didn't understand your horse or whatever. Keep trying.
Yeah. I do think a lot of us, I kind of think of us as flavors of ice cream. So some people like Rocky Road, some people want vanilla, and so you kind of have to have that right personality match to be the person you can hear from.
There's a phenomena, Daniel. You haul your horse to me or I to you. Okay, I haul my horse to you. And we have the first few lessons, and what you're telling me is fresh and new. And I can make these changes right now. My horse all of a sudden rounds up and he looks like he go to the Olympics and I'm on a high. That's maybe 3 or 4 lessons in. Now, all of a sudden, you've decided you're going to start picking my scabs. You're going to start digging deep onto the things I'm doing that's holding me back. Invariably, these are uncomfortable. Not only do I not like you telling me that I'm, not doing this well, but what you're telling me is going to require effort and work. And suddenly that initial flush of change that was such heady stuff. Daniel's changed my life. You should see us. Now you're just suggesting hard work. And I'm not seeing that launch. It's a bit like the airplane. Now we're leveling off at cruising speed. That is invariably the time that I will now perk up and I'll be looking for somebody else who could give me that first flush of success. It's very alluring. I've ridden with a guy I ride now with on as much as my fuel budget will allow. As he calls a spade with me for, I think, 12 or 14 years now. So very often I'll ride with him and he won't say much of anything. Maybe he'll just remark on something funny or not. But I've learned that if I don't hear too much from him, I think that things probably are going pretty well okay. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he'll watch me and he'll go, "How's that working for you?" And I'll have to stop and go, "Well, that's kind of why I'm here. I need, the sounding board." I'm good. But so I find that a lot of people don't want to ride with somebody for that long. And we can kind of jump around to different teachers, and I think it's hard on our horses. I'm not sure that the method matters as much as our belief in the method.
Yes, ma'am. I know.
Does that make any sense?
It definitely does. I know I spent 6 years in total working under other trainers, apprenticing. Yeah. And, that's way more hours than the typical lesson person would get. Yeah. I mean, I'm working with them 10, 12 hours a day for years. And I know there were still things I would pick up years in. And particularly because you knew that person's style so well that if they deviated from it for some reason, there was a reason. And now you figure out what the reason is, and you get into kind of the minutia. Someone, I do not remember who this was, and I kind of hate that I don't, because this is a fabulous idea and I would love to give them credit for it. But they mentioned that the scale of riding, if you said like a scale of 1 to 10, it'll take you longer to go from an 8 to an 8.1 than it took you to go from a 1 to a 6. When you get into into the littler things and the minutia, your rate of progress slows dramatically. There aren't these big things to tackle anymore. Now you're into little grayer areas and so forth, and that is where a lot of people stall out, for sure.
That's fantastic. It reminds me of like building a house, right? You can get the thing framing up and the roof on and everything. And you're like, wow, this is going fast. We will be in by Christmas, sort of thing. And now we're finishing out the windows and the baseboards and building closets. And it's the finish work that takes forever. But it makes me think of another conversation when you're talking about that. The need for so many of us to go back and sit and puddle around on basics. I can play around on a horse for longer than I like, just going to the bend a little this way, going straight, then the other way. Do you know what I mean? Just, it's very mindful and slow. You get kind of in the flow state, almost like a painter might or something. I often have to set a little alarm on my watch so I don't keep the poor thing too long so his brain leaks out his ear. But I'm fascinated in all that stuff that when maybe I was a kid, I could hardly wait to get away from it. I just wanted to go jump up. I want to go jump big jumps, run fast.
Yep.
You know,
I do way more work walking now than I ever did before. I didn't have the patience to
isn't that
walk.
the truth? Isn't
Yeah.
that the truth? There is
And
so much magic in the walk.
I now think I could design a little obstacle course of walking and lay it out in such a way it would be so technical and complex. No horse and human combination in the world could do it 100% correctly. And I think that's fascinating. There's so much more. One of the little tests I do at clinics, because I'm usually working with a group I don't know, and I know I've said this many times, but it's such a profound thing to me. I'll get them in a semicircle around me, and I'll just ask them individually to walk forward 7 steps and stop on the 7th step. The most out of 12 people I've ever had do that correctly is 3. And you would think
they don't even probably start thinking about their stop until the 7th step.
Correct. Their horse takes a half a step past or something like that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a very simple task until you try it, and then you realize, wow, that's harder than I thought it was. Or then ask them, ride your horse forward with the right front foot first.
I was just going to say that, picking a particular foot. Yeah.
And this is just way beyond most people's. They haven't really thought about it necessarily, much less practiced it and developed the skill.
Yeah.
And there's so much more in the nuance and the slow stuff than we realize typically to work on. So anyway.
Sometimes that reminds me, sometimes people will want to ask you about an exciting thing that's happened in your horsemanship. That's what they want to talk about. And often, if there was an award or a prize or a thing happening, that might be a moment that I'm almost most ashamed of in my horsemanship. I don't want to talk about that because that actually wasn't me in my best light. That was my horse actually stepping up and going, I'm going to do this for you despite the fact that you have behaved very badly here. And it's not my proudest moment. My proudest moment might have been achieving something very simple with a 3-year-old, or the spoiled older horse that, I get that spoiled older horse that wants to be caught and isn't kicking at me when I'm grooming him and saddling, and he has his head down and he takes his bridle, and that horse all of a sudden is an uncomplicated, ordinary horse.
Yes,
that is a prize-winning moment. Because that's a really big deal. That's not winning a race or jumping a jump or, yeah.
I had I need the therapy of releasing this out into the world. So last year I had a customer that I did not get along with him well. He was not my kind of people, and his goals were not my goals, that sort of thing. And he had a mare that came to me, one of these that had been in training with another trainer for years. So, I mean, she'd done halter and the pleasure and all of that stuff. Big old tank of a mare. And she was so incredibly sour. I mean, she just hated people, absolutely hated people. And he wanted her to be for his grandkids. And like, she was big and powerful and numb. I mean, I don't know what kind of bit this guy was riding her in, but like, you had to plow horse her around. Like, it was terrible. She was like fingernails on a chalkboard to be around.
Numb. That word explained it all for us. We know exactly what you're talking about.
And it took about 3 months, and I got her to the point where like she wasn't pinning ears at me anymore. She was starting to I'd go to catch her in the paddock and she would walk toward me. I mean, she was kind of starting to enjoy life a little bit and the process. And he calls me and has a guy that's interested in buying her and wants to come let that guy try her out. So I was like, okay, we set up a time and they came out, and this guy I got on her and rode her around a little bit and showed him what she was doing. And he gets on her and immediately like cheeked her around, bent her nose all the way around to her shoulder when like it's her first ride or something like that,
Yeah.
And then gets in the saddle and grabs both bridle reins and just whop, 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 and sends her off. He's in a round pen. They're not going anywhere. He sends her off hard as can be. Didn't walk her a step. Sends her straight in, stops her real hard, snatches her back into turning her back and forth really, really hard 7 or 8 times. And I was very close to the point of telling him to get the hell off of that horse and out of my round pen. Like it was about all I could take. And he didn't ride her very long at all. He did that kind of ricocheted around the round pen a few times and stopped. And I was just sitting there thinking, that might be the horse I did the best job on of every horse I'm going to fool with this year. And this jackass just undid all of it in 30 seconds.
And he broke, and when he did that, he broke your heart and hers.
Yeah, I was about ready to beat the hell out of him right there in the round pen. I was in a rage, so I kept my mouth shut as best I could. And if I had said anything to him, I was probably going to lose it on him completely. But anyway, thank you for that little therapy session. I'm glad to get that off of my chest today.
It is the hardest part about riding horses that will be meant for other people. And I don't know the way around that, actually. I don't know the way around that. Yeah. I've seen horses that came from my hands competing at a very high level down in the States, where the population is bigger, where everybody hauls to compete. And they did well. But I watched those horses going and I'm going, you're unhappy and you're filled with tension and you're just doing it because you're a good person. And it's very hard to watch. But on the outside world, they're doing really well because they're winning.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Which like is at the root of my long-standing difficulty in putting my horsemanship where I want to go with it in the same place as competing. And between not becoming, I don't like who I become when I'm competing. So I don't make good decisions sometimes. I mean, you could give me a prize for pony with the longest tail. And I will do my best to beat you and win that, Daniel. Mm-hmm. So it's that sort of thing where we're supposed to be really achieving a lot with our horses is often not where I want to go. But it's good to hear you say that there are people let you down in that regard and that you were proud of what you did with that mare. And then I wonder, was it a kindness to fix that mare and help her see the light, or was she better off just knowing people for who they were?
Yeah, that was if I had known that was ultimately where we were going, I wouldn't have done things the same way. You'd have just kept her mad because at least she would have been right. Yeah, she could have protected herself and been expecting it instead of.
It's a hard thing, and that is always the thing too. Is ethics in the horse business. The stumpers and the problems we wrestle with come to us in many different ways.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we've been talking for quite a while. The last thing I had planned, I took a note when I was asking you about your favorite way to relax, and I don't know if I'm reading my handwriting correctly here, but I believe you said something about stumps being stirred, and I really liked what you said about not fighting the wind. So would you talk with us a little bit more about that sort of stuff, how you kind of keep it all straight despite the social media world and the black mushroom cloud over the house when your husband gets home on occasion?
I'm laughing because I am a feely person, and that is both my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. So the very best things that I can do with the horses have me behave in the very worst way with other people sometimes. And so I think it's important to say that that is in there, that we have our characteristic traits that maybe always stay with us despite whatever work we like to do on ourselves. So I have lately decided that I'm going to be back into gardening. I used to really garden this place. It was 8 acres, our yard, and I used to garden, but I took gardening on like an Olympic sport. I wanted to wow people. I wanted to overcome all of nature, and, it destroyed me because you can't be that one thing in various areas of your life. So for instance, I am not a dog trainer. My dogs sit on the couch with me, begging nacho chips, because I have spent all day long trying to rot something beautiful out of a horse that's not really buying into it. When I come home, the dog is just allowed to be a dog. So I admit that. But I'm starting to garden again and be out in the wind and just putter around, not now because I think I want to impress busloads of people that might come and see it, but just for me, because I need to get my hands in the soil a little bit and celebrate the seasons a little bit and take a little break. I am, for this year, deciding that I am probably going to be slowing down a little bit. I don't need to have 6 and 8 horses in training at any one time, which is a lot for one 60-year-old woman who saddles her own horses. So maybe I will be riding 2 horses now, but bringing them farther along, remembering why I loved horses in the first place, because when it is your business, unless it's just me, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget. My own personal horses standing in the pen because I'm riding Keystone horses that are going to be sold and out the door. And no, I'm going to maybe start paying a little more attention into what got me hooked when I was younger and bringing my own horses farther along. And I think that will keep me going. The wind, I have learned lots of horses don't like the wind and people don't like riding them in the wind. But I have learned that how I process the wind, how I am in the wind, has a lot to do with how those horses deal with it.
Yes, ma'am.
And once we accept that, I think the sky's the limit to where our horsemanship can go.
So it sounds to me like we have this concept that you're supposed to continue dating your wife. Like if you're in this business as a business, you got to kind of continue dating the romance that got you in the business in the first place. And having, I have the same conflict myself. I almost feel like every moment I'm in a saddle, I'm teaching. And I don't get to play as much as I might want to, or just feel like I'm not on. You know what I mean? I can just go here and enjoy this
I know
process.
that 100%. I know that so well. Somebody came out here the other day and said, "Can we just go for a ride?" And I'm having a busy day, maybe not feeling well. And I looked at her and going, "Are you freaking kidding me? I can't just go for a ride." And I had to stop myself and go, "No, let's just go for a ride." It it becomes so much counting pennies. How long have I had this horse? The truck needs new tires. It just, right? It's the stuff that's going on in your head. And then I forget that I'm just actually still that same horse crazy little girl who thought that the world was found in looking in a horse's eye. I actually thought that that was the universe right there. So, she's still in there somewhere. Somewhere inside this bitter curmudgeon is still that kid.
Yes, ma'am.
And you too. Yeah.
Yeah. I get to do a little bit of that with my kids, but they actually don't ride very much. So the me taking time off thing just for me is something I don't do. much
And
at
so
all.
how do you
Anyway,
deal with that? Because my social circle, my life is filled with horse professionals. That's who I spend time with. And a lot of them, their kids will ride as well as they do come hell or high water. Because they're kind of almost tied up into who they are as human beings. And I watch that because of my 3 children, 2 don't ride anymore. They all had to help with the ranch. But as human beings, it is an alluring thing to think that who we are gets tied up with how handy our kids are with horses.
So, like my younger one is starting to ride a little bit more. My older son was starting to ride a bit more. The bigger thing is like they don't want me to teach them, and they don't trust that I won't teach them. Like my youngest son just came with me to a clinic a month ago, and he rode in the clinic on his horse, and it's the first time he has ever done something like that. And I very conscious, like I probably said 3 things to him the whole weekend. I almost ignored him and barely and that seemed to light his fire a little bit more. But I've also been very conscious of kind of what you said. There's a lot of horse trainers kids that never want to ride a horse again once they leave the house and they don't have to. So I wanted to make sure that if they were riding, they chose to ride and they weren't doing it just because it's my love.
It's an
they get to have their
occupational
own
hazard. Yeah, it's an occupational hazard for sure. I did pretty much everything I could to turn my kids off riding. I see that now. I didn't know any better. I did a bad job of it. I hope I'm a better grandma.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's the redemption stage, huh? We had my oldest one actually started one, or it was a restart, but she hadn't been ridden in years. I guess it's a year ago, a little more than. And he had laid her off for a couple of months and and she only had a week of riding on her. And I'm kind of, again, he didn't want me to watch him. I'm kind of out there and he's getting her back on and he's about to just saddle her and step right on her. And she was not feeling it that day. She was there was a billboard that said, "Don't do this. I need some work." And I can see the billboard and he doesn't see the billboard. And I made the comment to him about 4 or 5 times, like, you probably need to do some stuff with her. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do, but before you step on her. And he gives me this, I know what I'm doing, Dad. And he stepped up on her. She didn't take 2 steps and she bucked him off. He did a full flip and landed right on his butt, right in front of her. And she sat there looking at him. And I said, when a guy that's had as much experience as I have tells you might ought to do something, next time you probably ought to listen. I just rode away and left him with it. But,
poor kid.
Some lessons have to be learned the hard way.
It's hard to sit silently by. By the time I got my 3rd child, I wised up a little bit and I started hauling her to teachers that I trusted. And so that was the best of both worlds. She got her riding education in and I sat in the truck. And I was very proud of her and she felt good about herself. So it would be one thing I would say to lots of professional people: just because you can teach them doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Yep.
I have so enjoyed this conversation with you, and the crazy thing is I've got quite a bit out of it. You've told me a few things today that I will mull over the rest of the day, and I thank you for that.
Well, very good. I've enjoyed it as well. I really have. I wasn't quite sure where our conversation was going to go, but I liked it. And I think this will be a good one for folks to listen to.
I can go down the touchy-feely woo-woo trail with anyone. And quite a bit of my program is also lunging horses that need to rebuild their bodies and whatnot. So I do a lot of that, which is really weird for a sort of a Western-based person. But I think we talked about good things today.
Yes, ma'am. Well, and I am going to put links to your website and social media. And I didn't find your books on your website, but I did find them on Amazon.
Oh yeah,
So I was going to link to that.
I don't sell anything on my horse page. I don't even have a website. I got kind of an old defunct blog page that got to be way more work than I was prepared to put into it. So I let that die a sad little death. But mostly it's Facebook.
Okay. Well, we'll have links to all of that stuff. So if anybody wants to pick up one of Lee's books, I'm sure they would be well worth your time. She's certainly an interesting and insightful lady. And again, I really have enjoyed chatting with you. We need to keep in touch after this and everything.
You bet. As soon as I get off the computer and get my stuff done, I'm going to get started on that that bit course that you have done so thoughtfully.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Because I will fill my mind with some of the facts and science behind what my feelingness has figured out. And I look forward to that. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoy it and get some good stuff out of it. So
I will.
Anyway.
I will. Thanks, Daniel.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Take care.
You too.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.